Jim Williams with you for the New Mexico Suncast, and we're joined by Kristina Fisher. She is the Associate Director of Think New Mexico, and we're in their beautiful building right across the street from the state capitol in Santa Fe today. Kristina, 23 years?
23 years at Think New Mexico. I started right out of college. I was the third intern here and been full-time since 2002.
What happened when you were an intern that made you say, this is what I want to do?
It's the right fit. Well, what was great was it was just a few years old. So Think New Mexico was founded in 1999. I started in 2001. And so I really got to help build and create it, got to build out my role. And so it kind of just really created something that works really well for me.
Kristina, being the Associate Director and being involved in politics, those are two things. I understand being a director. I'm a retired banker.
Okay.
I understand having meetings about meetings. But when you start talking about politics, that's always been difficult for me. I don't ever ask the question, hey, should we all pay attention to politics? I think politics is part of our lives and we better, right? So when you consider your name of your organization, Think New Mexico, is it Think, New Mexico? Or is it Think New Mexico as your first thought when something comes to mind?
It's really Think New Mexico. It's put New Mexico at the center of your thoughts, which was another reason it was a really good fit for me. So I grew up here, went away for college, and was absolutely miserable out of New Mexico and spent every day I was gone thinking about New Mexico. And then when I got this job, I was like, well, that sounds about like what I've been doing anyway. But it is about that. And I would say with the policy piece, our role is really to take the time to think through that. So a lot of times policymakers are juggling a million different things. Our legislators are unpaid, they don't have much staff. So we're in a position to do a deep dive on policies and really do multi-state studies and come up with proposals that we think would work really well and then present that information to policymakers. Will
representatives come over here across the street and sit down and talk with you about these issues?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's one of the reasons we like being positioned so close physically to the legislatures. We often have them drop by.
Something about you personal. In your bio on the website, you use the word free time. I'd kind of like to know what that means.
Well, sometimes it's hard to know. When we're deep in the legislative session, we are 24/7 on, and so during the rest of the year, there are days when I'm able to take a break from the policy work and do other things.
Are you an outdoors person?
Very outdoorsy, yes.
I like it. Favorite place?
Hard to say, but the San Mateo Mountains, sort of southwest of Magdalena, gorgeous.
Yes.
So, but the whole state, I mean, there is hardly a bad place in New Mexico. That's one of the best things about it.
You know, the last time I was there, there was actually a herd of elk, which I wasn't expecting, because it's a little deserty.
Sure, you get pronghorn going across the
Yeah, I've seen some antelope.
Yep.
But wow, we have landscapes that are second to none.
Just remarkable.
Do you like the Four Seasons?
I love the Four Seasons. I love that we get the whole spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk about you're doing some volunteer work, I understand, with the Albuquerque Wildlife.
I do. So I've been involved with them since about 2009. And basically, this was an all-volunteer group founded by Aldo Leopold over 100 years ago, back in 1914. And it's just all about making sure that New Mexico has a wide array of species and the habitat to support them. And so it's taken different forms, but right now it's really focused on hands-on ecological restoration. So we go out on a weekend, we build these rock structures or log structures that help re-wet the landscape, hold more water, slow the water down, feed vegetation, and just make it better for wildlife. And it's a lot of fun.
We do have a real problem with water in our state.
Definitely.
And so what you're talking about is designing some ways, like some retention ponds and things like that?
That kind of thing, yeah. And we do a lot that's called induced meandering. So if a river, as it naturally goes, takes a wavy, bendy route, it travels a longer distance. That means the water's going slower, it doesn't have that erosive force. So we have a lot of gullies that have been cut, and the water runs straight and fast, and it runs off the landscape and leaves. And so you want to make the river curve again so that it holds that water on the landscape. We're able to grow more grasses and trees.
Okay, this isn't on my list, but I got to ask you.
Sure.
And I want you to be candid. So a lot of people that are hunters or fishermen, which is what I am.
Sure.
They think that people that have environmental concerns don't want them around. I don't actually think that's the case.
I don't think that's true. And the Albuquerque Wildlife Federation has always had a lot of both hunters and anglers and conservationists. I like fishing as well.
Yeah.
not just because it's my last name, but that is a family tradition. But I think they're very compatible because hunters and fishers absolutely need these intact habitat for the game and fish species. And so that was really where the environmental movement started, was Albuquerque Wildlife Federation started as Albuquerque Game Management Association, Game Protection Association. It was about how do we protect the landscapes that make sure that we have ducks to hunt and fish to catch. And over time, it expanded beyond game species and says, we need those and we also need non-game species. We also need the spotted owl. We also need the cutthroat trout that we're not necessarily gonna put up on a wall.
Sure. You know, I will tell you one thing that I had a concern about. I'm a lot older than you, but I've been fishing like in the Taos box up by Questo,
Sure.
8 miles out. When you hike down into the box, we used to catch a lot of native fish, the browns, etc. But somebody introduced northern pike to that river, and they pretty much destroyed most of the native fish.
Yeah.
Really fun to catch one, but they've not
They took over.
Yeah, they kind of took over. Now there are pike in Navajo Lake, which I fished at, but I always kind of wonder, can we do anything as a state and game management to kind of correct some of these things? I don't know how that kind of stuff happens, but
It's kind of painstaking, but we've seen it done a lot with vegetation, where you've got places where like tamarisk and Russian olive are really crowding out the native willows and cottonwoods, and you just kind of go in, take out the invasives, do some planting of the natives. So with fish, what you can basically do is do some targeted removal actions of the invasive fish, and then let the natives thrive. Hard to do on a big river like the Rio Grande, but they've done it on rivers like the Costilla up on the sort of northern border. They really just took it section by section and basically wiped out the non-native trout. So that's a award-winning fishery now.
when you say they, there's people watching. They're just voters
Who
like
are these
me.
they?
And I think there's people watching that would say, wow, you know, Kristina's got some ideas and she's doing some things. How would citizens of New Mexico get involved in this kind of volunteer work and help with some of these projects?
Sure. Well, the Albuquerque Wildlife Federation, like I say, all volunteer. Just Google it, and if you want to come out and join us, everyone is welcome. We have volunteers from toddlers to folks in their 80s, everybody in between. So that's certainly welcome. And then with Think New Mexico, which we're working at the policy side of it, same thing. Like, we would love to have more people contacting their legislators about issues that they feel passionate about. So one of the roles we really play is forging that connection for folks that are saying, like, I don't even know who my legislators are, let alone how to get involved, is we can help, guide them in that and say, they are representing you. So how do you make your voice known, your priorities known, so that they know that?
You mentioned earlier that some of the policymakers don't have the time because it's largely a volunteer group, and they're all working people like us. I shouldn't say us because I'm kind of a retired old guy, but at one time I did that. But I think people think, oh, if I get involved, it's going to take all this time. And really, to go to the nmlegis.gov site, find out who your representative is, look at who's authoring what bills. I think it's a little bit crowded if you wait till next year's legislative session to do that. What would you think a person should be doing right now? Like if they went to your website and started reading about some of the things you've accomplished. I think there's a legislative recap that's available. What kind of would you like, how would people interact with their representatives and maybe research things through Think New Mexico? Could that start now and they wouldn't have to spend very much time every day really getting ready? Oh,
absolutely. It doesn't have to be a big time commitment at all. It can be very small. So we have a couple of different things. One is we'd love to have folks sign up for our emails, which they can do on the website. We don't bombard you, I promise. I know some organizations it's like every day, sometimes twice a day. Thinknewmexico.org. So thinknewmexico.org.
All spelled out.
All spelled out.
And we've said that a few times, so we'll keep saying it.
thinknewmexico.org.
And it is a resource you intend people to use.
Absolutely, we set it up for folks. So you can sign up for our emails, and then you'll get sort of periodic updates from us about what we're working on. But the other thing we have is the Action Center. And so when any of the issues Think New Mexico is working on, we have pre-written emails that folks can edit and say, hey, I'm interested in smaller class size, which is one of our issues. I'd like my legislators to know I care about this. We've got a pre-written email. You just put in your address. It'll go to your senator and your representative, and you can put any information you want in there. Also, I would say in this off time, if you're interested in taking a little bit more time, often your senator or representative would be happy to meet with you. And so you can put that in your email and say, can we have coffee sometime? And then, can actually have a face-to-face with them. This is still New Mexico. We're a small state. Everybody's still neighbors. And that is really, there's a high level of accessibility, I would say, with our legislature.
Not on the list, but as you're encouraging us to talk to each other and visit and actually have a conversation,
yeah.
Are you optimistic that with all the differences we have with the extreme right, extreme left, moderates in the middle, various other entities out there, can we get along? Fred said something interesting. He was talking about Governor Rutherford years and years ago. It's before your time. And he said Governor Rutherford basically put a bunch of representatives in a room and said, enough. You guys got to work this out. You got to get it done. And I was teasing Fred. I said, could we do that in this room? Do you see people cooperating? Is there an interest in cooperating?
I do. So all of Think New Mexico's bills, we get bipartisan sponsors for every single one. Our medical malpractice bill this last session had 24 bipartisan co-sponsors, 12 Democrats, 12 Republicans, kept it even, Steven. But again, I think it's a place where New Mexico has an advantage, probably certainly over the national scene and over larger states, which is we really all still do know each other. And so the New Mexico legislature, they can't demonize each other to the extent that I think happens in bigger communities, because they're going to go run into each other at the grocery store, out fishing. So it's hard to sort of depersonalize. And so we do still have that collaborative, cooperative spirit. There's certainly forces pulling us apart, but there's a lot of New Mexico still bringing us together. And I think that's the only way we get things done, is if we sit everybody down and say, nobody's going to love this outcome. You're going to have to give a little, you're going to have to give a little, but we're going to come up with something that works well for everybody.
Yeah, I really like that approach, because sometimes, frankly, those of us who don't know the political process as well as you do, we get discouraged.
Oh, sure.
And I would say some of that is probably not entirely accurate reporting by our various news sources. The NewMexicoSun.com, our blog that we have, the New Mexico Suncast, what we're trying to do is we're not doing the analysis. We're talking to experts who know what they're talking about, and we're trying to give equal voices. Mm-hmm. So, we're not going to be the complaint department. You can complain, anybody, old guys like me can complain, but we don't want people to complain. You can say you don't like something, but you better have an alternative.
Have a solution.
Have a solution. A little bit more about you. You talked a little bit about restoration of the environment and ecological kinds of things. What is environmental justice?
So it's about making sure that everybody is treated fairly in terms of access to clean water, clean air. So you don't want to have disproportionate burdens on some people that aren't on others. So everyone should have equal access to clean air. And I'm
only, again, repeating what I find in the news,
sure.
but Las Vegas, for example, has had issues with their water.
Yeah, exactly.
What does it take to actually come together as a state and help this community recover?
Well, I think one of the things Think New Mexico has been looking at is sort of how do we spend our infrastructure dollars. So Las Vegas is having water problems because the big fires 3 years ago really took out their water treatment system. And there's just so much sediment and everything coming down from those burned slopes that's creating enormous problems for them. And so that would be high on the list if you're going to create a state infrastructure plan and say, this is a community that is not getting access to clean drinking water. They need to be high on the list. We don't do things that way. We, Think New Mexico thinks we should have a statewide capital plan, fund things in priority order, fully fund them, get them done. Instead, we split the capital dollars across all 112 legislators and the governor, and everybody funds little piecemeal things. And so here in Santa Fe, we might fund a sidewalk over here or a playground over there, and you're not funding the big thing. So we're not coming together collectively to do that. So that's something we find a really important reform that's needed, and we're going to keep pushing on that because we're sort of spinning our wheels and not getting those big things done.
Pretty common sense, Kristina. I mean, I listen to what you say and I'm just going, yeah, that seems like really logical. Why don't we just do that?
I was going to say the friction we're up against is everybody likes having that little bucket of money, right? So it right now is what derogatively is called sort of pork projects. So everybody gets their little, $1 million or $2 million to disperse. Every legislator likes that.
Well, we were talking about money earlier.
Yeah.
And if you talk to 5 or 6 different contractors about how to solve the problems in Las Vegas, they'll all have a different amount of money and a different opinion of what it takes.
Sure.
Now, those fires were largely caused by a federal
Absolutely, yeah.
burn
Yeah,
program.
those were both prescribed burns that got completely out of control.
So I think the reason that the federal government's not doing, one of the reasons, I'm sure there's others, but nobody's accounted for the money that it's actually going to cost.
Yeah.
Is that something you guys try to help with?
So we kind of stay out of the federal level. We've
Okay.
specialized. We're a small group, so we just do state level politics. So we stay out pretty much of the federal, pretty much of the local. So we're just sort of looking at what the state can do on a state level.
I like that. Well, but you're also thinking about infrastructure that benefits the whole state. But if you're going to fix the highway between Farmington and Santa Fe, that's got to be a pretty
That's a big project.
chunk of money.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And people don't realize, and you've talked about the Four Seasons, and you live in Santa Fe. People don't realize it's going to be 80 degrees today, but in October it's going to be 10 degrees at night. I mean, there's some extremes here.
Oh, absolutely.
And when you have moisture involved and you have any cracks in a road, that's how we get potholes, that's how we get bridges.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that we need to keep
There's
track
a lot of
of.
needs, absolutely.
A lot of needs.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you guys are here and doing this. What's the most difficult thing about your job?
It's the most difficult thing. That's a great question.
I would say most people that I ask that question of talk about employees.
Oh.
But Fred
I was going to say that's the easiest part. We're a great team.
And Fred said your team is amazing.
Yeah, it is. I think probably the most difficult part is that sort of gap between sometimes the common sense solution and the political reality. So we oftentimes are putting forth things that if you ask sort of your regular person on the street, they'd say, that makes total sense. Why are you having a hard time with that? So the very first one that I worked on when I started as an intern was repealing the food tax. And I was, a college intern. I went back to college and I told my professor, I was like, we're working on repealing the food tax. And he was like, when are you going to try something hard? And that took 3 years, and it has come back over and over again. So there's sort of there's the common sense, like this makes enormous sense. Why do we do this? And then there's the political reality of, well, it brings in a lot of revenue for state government and they don't want to give that up. It's a very stable source of revenue. And so things, again, the infrastructure one, like I think most people, if you said, let's have a capital plan, let's fund things in priority, fully fund them, get them done. We have $6 billion right now sitting unspent. This is crazy. Would agree with that.
Okay,
and
now
then you go to the politics of it and it's like, well, but then I have to give up my little pork barrel.
I'm going back to my Kristina. I said this to Fred. I said, as a banker, I could have 100 customers that had over $1 million loans for various projects, like a beautiful building like this. Less than 10% of those people could manage their checkbook. And see, that's the thing that is perplexing to me is you got $6 billion. I don't personally know, this is not a comment about our governor, but I don't know if Michelle Lujan Grisham is a qualified person to manage that money. I don't know. I don't know her advisors. But I know that there's people like in your organization and you research other states, how they spend money. So I guess I love the transparency. I think your Think New Mexico organization has promoted transparency and letting people know what's really going on.
Well, I'd say that the capital outlay problem, unfortunately, goes back about 3 decades. So it's been governors of both parties that have overseen it. It's really more of a legislative problem, frankly, than a governor problem. The governors tend to be sympathetic to the idea of a statewide capital plan, thinking, well, the agencies I oversee will implement it. Legislators say, but I know what I can get from my little district with my little bucket, rather than pouring all the buckets together and collectively doing more. So that one's a challenge. But yeah, it's a process. And the one good thing I would say is the more the public understands about it and the more that they talk to legislators, the more we're able to overcome that political reality. And so we've gotten a lot done by informing the public through the media sometimes, and also just directly, with our emails, with our social media, so that they know who are my legislators, what's going on, how can I make a difference? And it really does make an impact. I mean, we had 15,000 emails on the food tax one year, and that made all the difference in the world in terms of getting that done.
And people don't really realize when you go to the grocery store and you're buying food, you don't pay gross receipts tax.
Not anymore.
And people don't think about that as much as they should. Our gross receipts taxes are almost 8%.
I know, they're very high.
They're very high. So, well, thanks for all your effort. Thanks for spending the time today.
Sure, thanks so much.
And we'll look forward to seeing all the work you do in the future.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Nice to meet you.
Appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.